Heart's terrain was never a prairie, but you weren't wary. Yeah, like continuous thunder. Heart's terrain is never prairie, but you weren't wary. You took my hand.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, you're listening to 90.3 KRNU, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Up the floor to Trey McGowan. He'll lob it for his... Goodness! A one-hand hammer!
On 90.3 KRNU, it's Huskers Hoops Live.
You betcha! Jazz Shelley has a triple-double!
Now, here's your host, Jacob Schwantz.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's time again. Huskers Hoops Live. Hope you're having a good start to your Thanksgiving week. And folks, we have got a packed show today. I'm going to be going over all of the important games from last week from the Nebraska men's and women's basketball team. I'll look a little bit around the conference, see where everyone's standing, take a glimpse at what's coming up on the schedule for both the men's and women's team here at Nebraska. But I have a very special guest, one that I am honored to be able to bring to you all. The men's basketball voice of the Dukes, Ray Goss, will be joining the show. He'll be calling in just a bit to talk some Duquesne men's basketball and also about his career as really one of the most distinguished play-by-play talents in all of D1 college and all of college basketball. All that and more coming up on a great edition of Huskers Hoops Live here on 90.3 KRNU and on the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel. I'm live right there. You can come on to the stream, send a chat if you have a question. It should be a great time on this Tuesday morning. But obviously, Huskers Hoops Live giving you all of the recaps and reactions and breakdowns of everything regarding Nebraska basketball. So keep it locked here on KRNU all season long. And I want to get into the news for both the Nebraska men's and women's basketball team. The biggest news of this last week, between last week's show and this morning, is that Coach Hoiberg's squad, they got their best start since the 2008-2009 season with the win over Oregon State on Saturday. And that season, Nebraska went 6-0 to start. So the Huskers still need a few more wins in a row to kind of break past that season and continue to make history. But man, that was some really cool news to see this past weekend, especially with the way that this men's team played. So let's jump right into it. Let's kind of review some of these men's games from the past week. I'll start with Stony Brook. I know a lot of people are going to want me to start with the Oregon State game, get all my thoughts from there, but quickly let's touch on Stony Brook. Nebraska just pretty much dismantled the Seawolves 84-63, highlighted by 19 points from Jawan Gary in his kind of return to action in this 2023 season. 2 for 4 from three-point range. The jumper looked really good. I know in the offseason there was a lot of talk about how because of his shoulder injury, Jawan has really been working on his shooting touch from beyond the arc. So good to kind of see that already coming to fruition this early in his return. I also remember how good he looked driving to the rim. In that game, there weren't a ton of dynamic drivers. I think Bryce Williams was one player that stood out as somebody who could actually get past his defender, drive straight to the rim, and either draw a foul or draw some contact and get a layup at the rim. But Jawan Gary really embodied that attack mindset that I think Nebraska's definitely going to need out of the front court. We've got Rink Mast coming through every single game and being dominant at that center position. You've got Josiah Alec, who is a defensive machine and a rebounding machine, but so far the season hasn't really been that secondary scoring option in the front court. So if Jawan Gary can help kind of supplement some of that scoring that's missing from Jawan Gary so far, whether he's coming off the bench or if he ends up coming into the starting lineup eventually, I think it's going to be huge for Nebraska. 17 points from Bryce Williams in the Stony Brook game as well, who he had himself a week. It wouldn't surprise me at all if going forward in this season, if we see some Big Ten Player of the Week success moving forward. Not sure when that will come, as you know, obviously the Big Ten is a very tough, competitive, and frankly just highly talented college basketball conference. But the way that Bryce Williams was playing in this game against Stony Brook, and then especially in the win against Oregon State on Saturday, I mean, wow! Like this is the type of wing that Nebraska has been looking for. They had a good year with Bryce McGowens at that kind of shooting guard, kind of scoring wing. but there wasn't all that much around him talent-wise to help elevate what he could do offensively. But it seems like this year with Bryce Williams, he has that offensive talent, but Nebraska has at least got some supporting staff around him that's going to make this team very successful. I mean, they started with 4 straight wins after taking down Stony Brook, and it's looking really encouraging to look forward to. But no double-double from Rink Mast in that Stony Brook game, but still was one of the top rebounders for Nebraska. He was only 1 rebound shy of tying Bryce Williams' 9. So still obviously a great day from Rink Mast. And again, Nebraska out-rebounded their opponent. That's been by far the most important pattern outside of obviously winning these games consecutively. But the rebounding for sure has been the crucial part. It's been the key to these victories. It's not my opinion. It's ask anybody. This Huskers team has struggled to rebound the basketball for the last however many years under Coach Hoiberg, and now it seems like this year they're finally figuring out how to give themselves second chance opportunities and take them away from your opponents. I think that's been almost the more important side of the rebounding battle for Nebraska. That really was on display in the Oregon State game, forcing a ton of one-and-done possessions in that game in Sioux Falls. But Nebraska out-rebounded the Seawolves 45-28 as a team. I mean, if they can continue this, there are going to be some high-level Big Ten teams that are going to struggle against Nebraska because of their hounding defense, and they will not give you extra possessions. At least they haven't so far this season. So huge win to keep the momentum alive against Stony Brook. And then, folks, let's dive into it right here. Oregon State. Nebraska takes down the Beavers 84-63. It was a packed-out Husker crowd in Sioux Falls, South Dakota for a neutral site game, as I say in air quotes. You see it on the Huskers Hoops live stream on YouTube. But yeah, that was considered a neutral site affair. But if anybody watched that game on Peacock, it was virtually all red in that crowd. And obviously the travel from Oregon State versus from Lincoln, Nebraska, a lot different. And it was much easier for Nebraska fans to get there. It just not too long of a drive, definitely doable. But wow, I think that shows that a lot of these Nebraska fans are excited for what this year's team under Coach Hoiberg can do. And they're starting to show out. And keep an eye on this upcoming schedule because there are some huge home games coming up. And I fully expect Pinnacle Bank Arena to be similar to what we saw in Sioux Falls. I expect PBA to just be completely packed out. I've been a little bit disappointed in some of the attendance for some of these early non-conference games to build up this winning streak, but wow, I mean, Michigan State and Creighton coming up on the home schedule in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be amazing. But I'm going to step aside real quick here on Huskers Hoops Live as we've got a special guest coming up to join us in just a moment on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
Make a difference for kids, for people in poverty, for the environment. Join AmeriCorps and get things done right here in Nebraska. With lots of different programs to choose from, you can serve in your area of passion and develop your skills while earning money to pay for college or to repay student loans. All programs are filling AmeriCorps positions to start September 1st. Learn more and apply at serve.nebraska.gov. Sponsored by Serve Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Air, fundamental to all living things, and it's all thanks to trees. Not only do trees supply oxygen, they also provide homes to wildlife, filter water, and let's not forget their natural beauty. But the trees need your help. The Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation is doing their part to revitalize forests across the country, and you can help. Donate to the Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation today by visiting www.arborday.org. Be that breath of fresh air and ensure forests live on for future generations.
Back live on Huskers Hoops Live. And ladies and gentlemen, we have got a very special guest. We have got the voice of the Dukes, one of the most legendary college basketball voices in all of D1 basketball. We've got Mr. Ray Goss joining the show. Mr. Goss, how you doing, man?
Good.
All right. Thank you so much for joining the show this morning. And just first, I got to know, what got you into broadcasting in the first place?
Well, when I was in high school, all I wanted to do was play professional sports, probably baseball for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I was born and raised in the Pittsburgh area, and I was on the basketball and baseball teams. But not only didn't I start, I hardly ever played. So it started to dawn on me, I might not make it as a pro athlete. But what I like sports so much, I thought, I listened to radio, listened to games, and I thought, maybe that's something I could do. And I just set my sights on it. And Duquesne University at the time, and that's where I went to school, they had a student station, just like you have out there in Lincoln, and the students ran it. So I spent a lot of time there just volunteering and majored in radio and TV journalism, became the student sports director as a junior, did a lot of play-by-play to get my feet wet at it in all kind of sports, in addition to football and basketball, some baseball. And then I graduated and started looking for a job. Well, they wouldn't talk to me in Pittsburgh. They say, go get some experience. I said, I have a lot of experience. Oh, that's a student station, doesn't count. I wound up in Indiana, Pennsylvania, Jacob, and that's where I still live. Landed a job at the station, became the morning man, and thank goodness they also needed someone to do sports. So I jumped right in there. It took about 10 years. I kept in touch with Duquesne a lot, and they were not very good in the mid-'60s, so they weren't on the air. But then they got hot one season, and I was able to get in there, and they had one NIT game, and I co-hosted that thing and did it in Madison Square Garden. Then the next year I started doing them, and I've been doing now, this is my 56th year.
Yeah, I mean, just an incredible career thus far. Again, if you're just joining us on the show, Mr. Ray Goss, the voice of the Duquesne Dukes, who actually have a game coming up tomorrow against Nebraska here in Lincoln. And Ray, I got to ask you, the Dukes have 2 wins over opponents that Nebraska has also taken on this year. And the only loss of the year for you guys so far was by 3 to Princeton, who beat Rutgers just a few weeks ago. So what does Coach Dambrot for Duquesne have cooking with this year's squad?
Well, I think he has his best squad. He's a great coach. His 26th year coaching, coached at Akron very successfully, took into the NC2As, I think 2 or 3 times. He's pretty well known as the guy who coached LeBron James as a freshman and sophomore in high school, and they're still very close friends. He came to Duquesne 7 years ago, and the Dukes were struggling. They hadn't won in quite a few years. Took a while to rebuild them. Last year they won 20 games and used the portal pretty well to get a lot of new players. I know they had 10 new players last year, and unfortunately 5 or 6 of them stuck, and those are primarily the starters. 4 of them start, and he got about 7 new ones, and it looks better this year. They're picked 4th in the conference in the preseason meetings and all that, and the game against Princeton was just terrific. Princeton, wonderful ball club, the way they play, and the Dukes had a shot at the end to win it. They got a turnover. They were down 1, and they couldn't make the shot, and Princeton made 2 free throws to make the differential 3 points at the end. But you'll be interested in knowing, Jacob, I know they're playing in Lincoln tomorrow. We're not going. We're going to stream it. We've done this in the past, and we kind of decided with Thanksgiving being the next day, and especially with my broadcast partner on the road games, his mom and dad are still alive, and I get together with my kids and everything. So we're going to do it from Pittsburgh, but it'll be on a big screen, and it's not bad. I got used to it during the COVID thing. We streamed a lot of away games, and sometimes it's a little rough because you can't quite pick up the numbers on the far corner, especially of the opponent. I know the Dukes pretty well, but sometimes you're just a little leery of who they are. But we'll do it from Pittsburgh, even though it's in Lincoln.
Yeah, and I know that's definitely something that's grown in popularity, yeah, like you mentioned, ever since kind of the pandemic era. But what do you think the goals are for this year's Duquesne team? Because you mentioned last year had 20 wins, the year prior to that just 6, so a huge kind of turnaround over the last 2 years. And obviously with the great start that you guys have had so far this year, are you guys thinking conference tournament, March Madness? What's the thinking?
That's always the goal. That's always the goal. The coach, I think he told me he's, 63 now? And he said, I'm not going to be coaching when I'm 70. I think he looks at this as his swan song. He wants to take him to the NC2As. It was, his uncle that played there back in the 50s, and so he kind of is resurrecting the Dambrot name at Duquesne. And he's a wonderful guy and a coach, and I never saw anybody work harder than him in practice, Jacob. I go to preseason practices, especially just to do, as I call, my homework and get to know the new players. And 7 years ago, I went to the first practice, and I thought, I never saw anything like that. He is so intense and involved and on the court and running around, and not in a negative way, very positive. He'll grab a guy and say, now here's how you do it. You guard the guy from the side. You don't guard him this way or he's going to go around you. And he has a great rapport with the players. And he's, I think, learned how to use this portal. They do a lot of recruiting, obviously. Everybody does. And the portal is a big turnover every year, everywhere. And just to be chosen fourth in the league, that's the highest we've ever been chosen. Listen, we were in this league starting back in 1977 when it was called the Eastern 8 and then became the Atlantic 10. And now they should call it the Atlantic 15 because there are 15 teams in it. So the first year, we went to and won the championship with a big upset and lost in the first round of the NC2As. Norm Nixon was our star. He was the player of the tournament, and he wound up playing with the Lakers, was drafted in the first round, played with the Clippers, had a very good pro career, won a ring with the Lakers, and I still see him from time to time, and great young man, came out of Georgia. When they went down recruiting someone else and happened to spot him. So it's an interesting story, but that's the last time Duquesne has been into the NC2As, 1977.
Yeah, just a great opportunity this year to kind of, like you mentioned just a moment ago, do something that's would kind of change the momentum of that entire program. But for Huskers fans who may be unfamiliar with this year's Duke squad, who do you think's at least one key player that Nebraska fans should kind of keep their eye on for Duquesne tomorrow?
Well, I'd say there are two. Last year, Day Grant made second team all-conference, and Jimmy Clark made all-defensive team. They're both seniors this year, both transferred in through the portal. Day Grant is a 6'2 senior from Lorain, Ohio, played at Miami, Ohio, and he's averaging about 21 a game. Jimmy Clark is a senior 6'3 from Covington, Georgia, down there where Norm Nixon came from, and he transferred in from Northwest Florida State College. He's around 18 a game. So those are our two big guns. We have a point guard who's kind of interesting, Kareem Rozier. He's only 5'9", a sophomore from Detroit, and he appeared last year, and I was just amazed. The team more or less let him take over the leadership. He's just very enthusiastic. The coach was with it. It's rare to see a freshman come in at 17. He's just 18 now, and he just leads them, vocally and just very positive. So they have three really good guards, and as is Kareem. He's a good shooter. He's averaging 10.5 a game, good on defense, and so our strength is at the guards. The big guys, we have some big guys. Two of them that I think have a lot of potential are sophomores, around 6'9" and 6'10", but they were both injured part of last year, very inexperienced. They make some good plays, and being young and inexperienced, they make some plays that aren't so good. And they brought in some pretty good people. One of them is a guy named Andrei Savrasov. He's a grad student, 6'7", 225, from St. Petersburg, Russia. and he starts. So obviously he's pretty good. And they've got a couple other guys. They have twins, Foussini Dramé and Hassan Dramé. They're both grad students, 6'7" each. Last year they started for LaSalle, and they're seeing a lot of action. So the thing that Keith Dambrot, the coach, has this year that he hasn't had before is depth. And so he's pressing a lot. He presses literally the whole game, trying to wear down that other team and get into their bench or get their starters a little tired so they're not as efficient toward the end of the game.
Yeah, the depth is going to be really interesting to watch tomorrow because you mentioned how Duquesne has got all these players and they've got so much depth. But that's actually been a strength for Nebraska so far this year as well, something that really hasn't been the case for Coach Hoiberg since he's gotten to Lincoln. But I want to bring this conversation back to you and your career for a little bit. You were inducted into the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame just a few months ago. How does it feel to have this amazing honor on the long list of your career accomplishments?
Well, I always laugh at it. I said, if you get old enough, and I'm 86 years old now, and you've done something forever, they probably look at it and say, what's with this guy, huh? How's he able to do? We better say something nice about him. It's just a longevity thing. I mean, it is kind of unusual. There were a couple of times that I came close to losing the job because, as in any market, the stations switched around. The owner, whoever owns the rights to the game signs the checks. You can do nothing wrong in this business and lose a job. For example, one year I got a call, it was in, 73 or 74, I think, from a guy in Pittsburgh that I didn't know. He says, I've listened to you on basketball. Do you do some football? I said, well, I do IUP football. I live in Indiana, PA. Indiana University of Pennsylvania is one of the top Division II teams every year, it seems like, in football and basketball. So I did all their games for years. In fact, did Duquesne and IUP together, and when there were conflicts, naturally I did Duquesne. But they were very, very good in football. And I said, well, I do football for IUP, and he wanted to hear a tape, and I sent it to him. I wound up doing the Penn State football games that year. Now go back. This is long before ESPN and everything live. And what we did is we traveled to every game. You had to do the games, and we videotaped them live. You're there doing the whole game. Rushed back to Pittsburgh. Usually had a flight that night. Saturday night we were out Air Force Academy, all over the place doing games, and they'd make up these tapes. And we were on about 20 different TV stations, starting in Altoona, PA, which is only about an hour from State College, where Penn State is, of course, and then in New York, New Jersey, and everything. And all they did that year, Jacob, was go 11-0. John Cappelletti won the Heisman. They went to the Sugar Bowl and won that, but Ray Scott did that. That was on ABC and everything. So next year, I'm all set to do it. In fact, my picture and everything's in their media guide. And the guy who hired me originally, who signed my checks, he got outbid on the rights by someone else, and they brought Ray Scott out of retirement, and he did the game. So it's, you're going to get into the business probably. It's like anything, it's who does the hiring and signing the checks. I did nothing wrong. I had nice letters in my portfolio from, oh, you did great. If your team goes undefeated, it's pretty hard to look bad. So, but that's what happens in this business. But with Duquesne, I've been fortunate enough to hang in there for, this is the 56th year, yeah.
And because of all that success, I'm sure you have, in the last however many years, have had a ton of people reach out to you for advice. So what advice would you give for any kind of young up and coming play-by-play talent so that they can kind of have some sort of level of success that you've had over these last 50-plus years as the voice of the Dukes?
That's a good question, and you're right. I have had that question a lot. I didn't have the opportunity to do this at Duquesne. They didn't have this kind of program before, but definitely intern somewhere where you can get your foot in a door, like at a TV or radio station that's heavy in sports. Because let's face it, I managed a radio station for many years, co-owned a station, and when you do the hiring, you tend to hire someone that you know or know of pretty well, or someone gives them a good recommendation. So, yeah, I would say the biggest thing is to intern somewhere or just hang out and, as much as you can with the teams. near your city or wherever. And, I've applied for hundreds of jobs over the years and didn't get them in 99.9% of the time. I did 1 year, I think it was 94, 95. The NBA over the years, as you probably know, have teams in the G League and the C League and that. Pittsburgh has had different teams, with the thought of maybe getting an NBA team, and they had a team come in here called the Piranhas. And I applied for the job. And I got a call from the guy at the station. He said, "You're interested in doing these jobs, this games?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You do the Duquesne games, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I went to Duquesne. I know who you are. Why would you want to do these?" I said, "Well, I'm not giving up Duquesne, but I looked at the schedule, and they play all their home games at Palumbo where Duquesne plays, so they can't play the same time. Some are Saturday afternoon, Saturday night." I said, "I think I could do about 80% of it." He said, "Oh, but they want someone to do them all." Well, he finally negotiated, and I did both teams. And I did 81 games that year. I loved it, but it was backbreaking sometimes just getting from one place to another. One time I did 5 games in 6 different cities. But they went all the way to the finals and played in Yakima, Washington, and lost to them 4-2. And next year, guess what? They folded. They folded. The guy that owned them, he was a millionaire. He said, "I'm giving this 3 years." And I thought, if I get my feet really wet here, some NBA team will pick me up or I'll get a foot in the door, but never happened.
That is a crazy story, and definitely something to keep an eye on if you're a young broadcaster, just attacking all these certain opportunities, but also kind of realizing that at a certain point you have to kind of limit yourself, because you mentioned doing all those games plus your original assignments with Duquesne was probably exhausting. But Ray, I want to honor your time commitment. Thank you so much for joining me on Huskers Hoops Live. It's been an honor to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me, Jacob. I appreciate it.
All right. Good luck tomorrow. It should be a good game, and I hope you have a good call, man.
All right. Thank you. Bye now.
That was Mr. Ray Goss, the legendary voice of the Duquesne Dukes. One of the greatest basketball voices. You can hear it just on that phone call, the way that he, can tell a story. One of the most important factors for a play-by-play broadcaster, especially on radio when you're trying to describe what's going on in a way that captivates the listening audience. But just some quick facts about Mr. Goss. I mentioned he's in the Hall of Fame for the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters. Over 50 years served as the voice of Duquesne. This year is his 56th season on the radio for Duquesne. He's the longest tenured D1 radio broadcaster. He also authored a book titled Misadventures in Broadcasting. Definitely going to be looking to get my hands on that one. His first game for Duquesne was called back on March 17th of 1968. He talked about it a few minutes ago about how that was in the NIT, but he's only missed 3 games in his entire Duquesne broadcasting career. Just absolutely phenomenal work from Ray Goss, and definitely an honor to have him join me on the show. One of my favorite guests for sure that we have had on the show the last year plus. So really excited that I was able to bring that perspective. But we're going to step aside here on Huskers Hoops Live. When I come back, I'll get into more of the Oregon State game. Got some more to talk about there. And then I'll get into all the games from the Huskers women's basketball team when we return on 90.3 KRNU and Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
Thanks for calling Jake's Bouncy House. This is Jake. How can I help you? Hi, Jake. My name's Stanley, and I was just wondering if you're hiring. No, we're actually not. Sorry for the inconvenience. Oh, Burt's Bees. I can't find a job anywhere.
If you're a college student in need of a job, UNL's Career Services is here to help. With jobs ranging from bouncy house employees to internships, UNL Career Services has a fit for everyone. Visit them on the 2nd floor of the City Union or anytime online at unl.edu/careers. The help you need to make money is at the tip of your fingers.
Exaggerating high school athletic achievements to your new college friends. Promising your new college friends that you'd a partial football scholarship to no-name state in Montana. What are these, you ask? These are the symptoms of someone with high school peaker syndrome, or HSPS. HSPS is a serious mental health condition that affects college students post-high school athletics. Thankfully, there is a cure to this crippling disease known as the UNL men's rugby team. UNL men's rugby team offers students the opportunity to relive those glory days. Tackle your HSPS head-on by visiting the rugby team's website at unlrugby.com.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
Why is it that bad days and cigarettes go together so well? But they do. And when the stress builds up, so does my craving. Even though it's been months since I quit and I'm doing fine, it still gets to me. So I reach for my running shoes and head out into the night, putting one foot in front of the other, and my cravings behind me.
Call the Nebraska Tobacco Quit Line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW, 1-800-784-8669. Paid for by Tobacco Free Nebraska, aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Getting involved on campus, meeting new friends, and networking for the future can seem scary, but Scarlet Guard makes it easy for both graduate and undergraduates. Social events help students connect with others around campus, while the professional events help students network with alumni from around the globe. Possibilities within Scarlet Guard are endless, so join today. Go to huskeralum.org/Scarlet Guard or contact the Nebraska Alumni Association. Students today, alumni tomorrow, Huskers forever.
Some students cannot afford to wash clothing or bedding. Some also have trouble paying for food over the course of a semester. UNL offers a pantry service to help these students in need. The pantry, also called Open Shelf, offers hygiene products, laundry detergent, and non-perishable foods. Open Shelf is open to all UNL students, and use of this service will remain confidential. Open Shelf is housed on the second floor of the Lutheran Center. It is open 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. Mondays and 2 to 5 p.m. Fridays. For more information on Open Shelf, visit openshelf.unl.edu.
Back live here on Huskers Hoops Live for the back half of this week's show on 90.3 KRNU and also the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel. Live chat going in there if you want to ask some questions or if you got a few comments about Nebraska basketball, go ahead and shuck them right in there. If you're just joining us, you missed a great conversation with Duquesne men's basketball radio voice Ray Goss. That'll go up, and with this live stream will be up after today's show, right up on the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel. So make sure you go and subscribe there. All of our shows will be back on demand on the channel after they air live on the air. Let's get back into the men's basketball game against Oregon State. Didn't talk too much about that before the interview, so I want to get back into it here. I mentioned before it that this neutral site game was pretty much a Nebraska game. There was so much red in the crowd. Really impressive showing from the Nebraska fans, and I feel like this game was by far the best performance, and maybe I'm missing a few that are slipping my mind, but this just felt when I was watching it like the best performance we've seen from a Coach Hoiberg squad from start to finish. There were some concerns in the beginning of the game, around maybe the 3 or 4 minute mark. It was still kind of back and forth. Oregon State looked pretty good. This was an undefeated team coming into the game. I believe it was their guard Jordan Pope had a strong start to the game, but then Nebraska just goes on a 20-0 run in the first half. That is insane. This Nebraska offense was shooting the lights out, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, we saw Juwan Gary hitting shots. We saw Bryce Williams hitting shots. We saw Sam Hoiberg hitting corner threes. it was just so satisfying to watch the team perform in this level, because we've been waiting for a team that can do things like this, who can rebound the basketball so well, who can go and play in transition the way that Coach Hoiberg has been wanting for years, and actually do it at an effective capacity. Bryce Williams, he led the Huskers pretty much all day. He was attacking at the rim. He was dominating on the wing for Nebraska as well, just scoring in a multitude of ways. I think probably his highlight of the day was he got the ball in the deep left corner, and he just completely blew by his defender along the left shoulder to the baseline and had a nice dunk. He had 25 points on 9 of 17 shooting, made 3 threes, 4 for 4 from the line. Didn't do too much else outside of that. He did have 2 steals and a block defensively, so the defense was there from Bryce Williams as well, but only 3 rebounds, 2 assists. He was a kind of a one-track mind offensively. He was a bucket getter in that game, and he played good defense, but on the offensive end, it was just give the ball to Bryce and let him cook. And he definitely cooked up a Michelin star meal in that game. Just fantastic offense, 25 points in 28 minutes from Bryce Williams. Big kudos to him. 15 points, 13 rebounds for Rink Mast in 28 minutes. Another double-double for Mast. He just continues to be one of the best players in Nebraska right now. I feel like there was some expectation that he would be a solid player in Lincoln, but I don't think fans were really expecting this level of production from Rink Mast. I mean, I think it's now 4 double-doubles in 5 games for Rink Mast, and he's had a 20-20 game. He's had now all of these double-doubles that are efficient on offense with shooting the basketball, and the footwork has been insane at the rim. Rink Mast is a problem, folks, and he looks like he's going to be an All-Big Ten player, if I'm being honest. But after watching this game, I do kind of have some slight concerns. There is not as much depth behind Mast at the center position as I think I would like going into this physically demanding Big Ten regular season coming up, because you've got players like Blaise Keita who haven't played at all this season yet due to injury, and he is going to play that backup 5 eventually, but like I just mentioned a moment ago, he hasn't played yet. So what's his level of production going to look like coming off this injury? He hasn't played in months, and with the way that Rink Mast has performed, any sort of downgrade from that will be felt, because he is so effective in a multitude of ways. He's not just a rebounder. He's also getting you at least 10, 13, 14 points. He's one of the leading scorers for Nebraska this season. He can shoot the ball from the perimeter. That's something Blaise Keita cannot do at this point in his career, at least as effectively as Rink Mast. So if he does end up getting banged up for a few games, how's the rebounding going to be affected? How's the offense going to be affected? He had a couple of great passes, kind of some pocket backdoor cut passes to Keisei last week. And that's something that the offense needed to get going, because that was kind of outside of the 3-point shot. That was basically Keisei Tominaga's bread and butter all of last year to get his offense going, was those backdoor cuts, and the passes most of the time came from the 5-man, that being Derek Walker in 2022, 2023. So if Rink Mast misses a few games, don't be surprised if Nebraska starts to fall apart just a little bit. But don't want to stick on those negatives too long. Obviously, he's healthy right now. He's still playing in the mask, and I think it's kind of become an iconic look in Lincoln. But I think once he can finally get out of it and the doctors clear him to play without it, no doubt he's going to drop the mask. It's something that fans love to see, but I'm sure him and the rest of the players who play in them due to their injuries would love nothing more than to be able to go out there free of the mask. So Juwan Gary, I mentioned it earlier, he has really improved his jump shooting. The jumper was still there for Jawan in that game. He only made 1 3, but he was 5 for 10 from the field, still in double figures. He had a double-double, 12 points and 10 rebounds. He was the other man on this Nebraska team with a double-double in that Oregon State game. So good to see him getting an impact as well. And it's just amazing. You think back to this 20-0 run in the first half. This is now, I believe, 3 games in the first 5 where Nebraska has gone on these massive runs. We saw it, I think it was against Ryder, I want to say, where Nebraska went on like a 17-2 run. Stony Brook, we saw another one. And then obviously this Oregon State game, they go on a 20-0 run in the first half. I mean, it looked like the Beavers couldn't make a shot. And some of these were tough shots and, but makeable shots. But a lot of them were just straight up clamps from Nebraska, and there was just nothing open. So they had to chuck something up. And then this is where the second aspect of those runs come from. You have to be able to rebound the basketball defensively so that you can force one-and-done possessions going through these runs for the opposing team, and that's exactly what Nebraska did. It's the first time since the 2004-2005 season where the Huskers have out-rebounded 4 straight opponents as well. That's the last big point from this Oregon State game I'll touch on. The rebounding's been huge. They did it again. The question is, though, will they keep it up? And I think they will. But I want to get into now the women's basketball games for Nebraska from this past week. We'll start with Alcorn State, as we've got just about 17 minutes left on the show. It has been a packed show, so I apologize. There's a lot to get through in these 1-hour shows. So Alcorn State, the Huskers win 79-32 last week. By far one of the best defensive performances under Coach Williams. It essentially is her best performance, as it tied the 8th fewest points allowed in Huskers history, and it was also the lowest since Amy Williams has become the head coach at Nebraska in the 8 seasons now that she has been with the Huskers. So 32 points to Alcorn State. Obviously, Alcorn State is not a top-tier, well-known powerhouse program, but it's still a D1 program. It's still a team that's coming into Lincoln to win. And for Nebraska to just completely dominate them in that way was incredibly impressive, in my opinion. A big reason for that? The rebounding. It's becoming a pattern here in Nebraska. And I love to see it. 52-31 advantage on the glass for Nebraska against Alcorn State. This Huskers front court is really, really looking good this season. Natalie Potts, she was solid, but in the Alcorn State game, it was really the Logan Nisley and Jess Petrie kind of coming out party on the season. 18 points combined from those 2 freshmen off the bench, which was really important production because we saw some concerning injuries at different points in this game. Obviously, Jazz Shelley went out pretty early in the first half, didn't return to the game. We saw Callan Hake kind of fill in for that Jazz Shelley role the rest of the way alongside Darian White in that backcourt. But then even Callan Hake went down at the end of the game. Luckily, both players did return in the next game against Creighton, but there were definitely some concerns with them kind of going down. And this is a Nebraska team that's already lost Allison Widener to injury in that backcourt. They cannot afford any more serious injuries. So really good to see that both Shelley and Hake were able to return for the Creighton game. I thought it was a great showing from Nebraska. They had a lot of momentum coming into this ranked matchup against the Blue Jays at home, but unfortunately, the first loss in Lincoln of the season came on Sunday. Nebraska loses 79-74. It was a game in front of over 6,600 people, which was pretty cool to see. And Markowski, she actually had a great week. She put up now back-to-back 20-plus point performances. She was great in the Creighton game. She still wasn't enough to kind of help lead the Huskers to take them down in the first ranked matchup on the season for this Nebraska team, but still a great performance that you don't want to kind of just let fall to the wayside just because of a loss. Moving on from that, Natalie Potts, she is coming through in a huge way this season. 16 points from the freshman, and it's now almost a sure thing that she is going to have a great freshman year, because now we've seen her be great against a great team, a ranked Creighton team that played Nebraska as tough as any opponent has played them this entire season. And even though it came in a loss, Natalie Potts was one of the highlights for this Nebraska team. So good to see a freshman stepping up and not kind of shying away from the moment of a tough ranked matchup. And I think that bodes well for not only Natalie Potts, but this Nebraska team going forward this season, that they've got a reliable front court member alongside Alexis Markowski to kind of rely on even in these tough games. One of the reasons for the loss, though, unfortunately, was Jazz Shelley. She really struggled from the field coming off that lower leg injury in that Alcorn State game. You saw the shooting splits, 2 for 11 from the field, 1 for 8 from three-point range. Brutal numbers, but I don't mind her shooting this much. I feel like Jazz Shelley is at her worst when she's being too passive. You can say she's getting the offense involved, but she is statistically one of the better shooters on this Nebraska team, and you can't let her only put up 5 or 6 shots or only 7 shots in 4 quarters. She needs to be shooting, 11, 12, 13 shots, in my opinion. I don't think she is a 2 for 11 shooter every game. It's just really unfortunate that it happened in this Creighton game in a ranked matchup, because if you look at the numbers, Nebraska played Creighton really close. 79-74 is the final score. And the Huskers might win this game if she goes maybe 5 for 11 from the field instead of 2 for 11, or 3 for 8 from three-point range instead of 1 for 8. So a little bit concerning, but nothing to kind of really just turn you off from this women's basketball season as a whole, because they did play them tough. And Creighton's a good team that beat Nebraska last year, so it's not like this was a massive surprise that the Blue Jays they stunned Nebraska and Lincoln. That's not the case. This is a good Creighton Blue Jays basketball team, and I think that Coach Williams is going to get this squad kind of back to form, and it starts again coming up in a few days this week with some big games. Let's look at the schedule real quick as they play Lamar in St. Petersburg, Florida on Thursday to start the week, and then they've got TCU on Saturday. So 2 important games, technically neutral site games in St. Petersburg, Florida. So we'll see if they can kind of respond from this tough loss. I'm going to step aside one more time here on Huskers Hoops Live. When I come back, we'll kind of take a look at some of the games coming up this season for Nebraska in the next week or so on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel.
If you're experiencing anxiety, depression, grief, or are even just homesick, try talking to a friendly professional at CAPS, your university's counseling and psychological service. They offer individual and group services to any registered student at UNL. International students, that means you too. Just call your university health center on city campus anytime Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The services are easy and confidential, and the best part is the first 3 sessions are free. Go online at health.unl.edu/CAPS.
This is Logan.
What's up, everyone?
Logan's been going to UNL for 4 years now.
I know everything that's going on here.
Logan is somewhat informed about campus events.
Like the football game? And I think there's some kind of election, I think.
Don't be like Logan. Pick up a copy of the Daily Nebraskan or follow them on Facebook and Twitter. Not only can you be updated with events on campus, you can read profiles on some of the most interesting people around Lincoln and get unique coverage found nowhere else, because keeping up with the news is one of the most important things a student can do.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
Why is it that bad days and cigarettes go together so well? But they do. And when the stress builds up, so does my craving. Even though it's been months since I quit and I'm doing fine, it still gets to me. So I reach for my running shoes and head out into the night, putting one foot in front of the other, and my cravings behind me.
Call the Nebraska Tobacco Quit Line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW, 1-800-784-8669. Paid for by Tobacco Free Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Back live on Huskers Hoops Live, wrapping up week number 5, I believe, of this basketball season for at least the show. And just before we look at some of these games coming up in the next week or so for Coach Hoiberg and Coach Williams, I want to look around a little bit at the Big Ten standings, as we'll start with the men's side of things. Nebraska 5-0. No conference games yet on the schedule for any of these Big Ten teams, so still a complete season to get these standings going. But Nebraska 5-0, one of only 3 Big Ten teams left undefeated to start the 2023-2024 campaign. You still got Penn State at 4-0 and then Purdue at 4-0, but don't let that fool you and make you think, oh, Nebraska's got this one in the bag. Illinois 4-1. They are a ranked team. They are a great team. Indiana looks very solid as well. And then you got to keep your eye on Michigan. I know they are a team that people have kind of been on the fence about, including myself, but they've had some impressive wins and they've got some impressive talent that have had big-time offensive performances, and offense a lot of the times causes problems for a lot of these teams in the Big Ten just because of how physically and defensively minded a lot of these teams are. If they can't keep up offensively, it's tough to play against. We saw that a lot last year with teams like Illinois, who were inconsistent, but their offense carried them in a lot of games. So don't lose sight of Michigan. On the other side, for the women's standings in the Big Ten, again, no conference games yet on the record, but only 2 undefeated teams in the entire conference still standing. Michigan State and Penn State at 4-0 and 5-0, respectively. Iowa still up at the top of the conference at 4-1. Michigan at 4-1 overall this season. They come to Lincoln in early, or more like mid-January, so that should be a pretty fun game to watch. Indiana, obviously, at 3-1, one of the toughest teams in the conference. Ohio State sitting at 3-1. Their only loss so far this year has come to USC and Juju Watkins, and one of the most fun teams to watch in the country. So Ohio State with J.C. Sheldon and Cody McMahon and Rebecca Mikhalishikova are going to be trouble as well. Nebraska still sitting around middle of the pack at 3-1 as well, alongside, 4 other 3-1 teams in the conference. So, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago on the show, even with the loss to Creighton, don't just give up on this team. It's only one loss, and there's a lot of teams that have had early losses out of the gate. But we'll get to one chat here in the YouTube live stream talking about some of the offensive struggles against Creighton. Definitely a concern. I mean, when your best shooter in Jazz Shelley, or at least one of the best shooters, it goes 2 for 11, I believe it was. It's a little bit concerning that, I don't want to blame any sort of injury, because we don't know for sure that impacted what her performance was, but definitely something that she is going to be looking to bounce back on. And you know, Jazz Shelley, her mindset, she's not going to let that affect her. She's going to go out and give her best every single game. So I'm pretty excited to see how she bounces back against Lamar on Thursday, I should say. And talking also in the chat about Natalie Potts being a secondary option rather than a primary, I don't think they're going to give her that opportunity as a freshman, at least this early in the season. We've seen Markowski. She had 2 back-to-back 20-plus point performances, and even though sometimes she misses some shots right at the rim, she's still that top offensive option for Nebraska. And then when Jazz Shelley can make her shots, she's by far at a minimum, a secondary option. So I think it's actually a good thing that Natalie Potts is seen as a second or even third option offensively, because when that is happening, that means Nebraska is doing a good offensive performance, because she is that good as an offensive player. And if she's being relegated to a second or third option, if she is the Kevin Love or the Chris Bosh of this Nebraska women's basketball team, I'll take that. I think that is going to bode well for Coach Williams' squad this season. But let's look at some of the upcoming games the rest of the week for Coach Hoiberg and Coach Williams. We'll start with Coach Williams. I mentioned a moment ago, Lamar on Thursday in St. Petersburg, Florida. They move on to play TCU on Saturday in St. Petersburg as well. And remember a couple weeks ago on the show what Drake Keeler had to say about this TCU team and how they have had a complete overhaul of the program over the last few months in the offseason. They've started this year 5-0. They're averaging over 75 points per game. And folks, they went 8-23 last year. They start 5-0 this year. It is almost a completely different team here in 2023. So TCU, they could present a major challenge for Nebraska this upcoming weekend. And I think we're really going to need to see that top-tier defense that they showed and flashed a little bit against Alcorn State. I don't know if they're going to be able to hold TCU to 30 points like they did Alcorn State, but a guy can hope. So let's look at the men's basketball schedule coming up. They've got Duquesne tomorrow night inside PBA at 7 p.m. Central Time. Again, if you're just joining us, listen back to this show. Check out the interview with Ray Goss, the voice of the Dukes. Great conversation with him about the Duquesne basketball program, and they are going to be a challenge as well. Their only loss of the season was by 3 to Princeton, who beat Rutgers earlier this season. So Duquesne is no joke, and they're bringing a challenge with them to Lincoln tomorrow night. The Huskers then move on to play Cal State Fullerton on Sunday, and I will actually be on the call for that game right here on KRNU. So it should be another fun week of basketball in Lincoln as the Huskers look to start 7-0 in men's basketball, and we'll see if the women's team can kind of respond from a tough loss on Sunday to the Creighton Blue Jays. But that is going to do it here on Huskers Hoops Live this morning. Make sure you keep it locked on KRNU all season long. We've got men's and women's basketball broadcasts at home, all the games. And again, Tuesday mornings, 8 to 9, every single Tuesday right here on 90.3 KRNU and the Huskers Hoops Live YouTube channel. Hopefully when I come back up on the airwaves on next Tuesday, we'll be looking at a Nebraska team that is still undefeated in men's basketball and, hey, potentially on the verge of being ranked. But with that being said, go Big Red.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, you're listening to 90.3 KRNU.